So today we're going to explore a very important topic about death and the fear of death. I've been discovering that really this is the keystone, the foundation stone of the whole ego script. But it's also the one subject that we hardly ever look at. We push it aside, we bury it, quite literally. The fear of death is really what is behind everything that's happening in the world right now. And we're doing everything we can to alleviate that fear, to get rid of that fear, because any look at that fear, we want to push away. We either deny it, or we do whatever the authorities will tell us to do to get rid of that fear. Sometimes we rebel against it, and because it feels like it's taking our freedom away, but we never really get to look at the fear of death. I probably have had the same kind of thoughts about death that you've all had. And yet A Course in Miracles comes along, of course, as usual, and gives us a whole new perspective on this very important theme. So I'm going to go through this handout and expand on it. It's a handout that you'll get later, and expand on it. And many of the quotations in it come from A Course in Miracles, either in the Chapter 19, The Attraction to Death, and in the manual, What is Death? Those two main sections. Plus lesson 163, which I'll mention later. Everything that we're doing in the world, like wearing masks, having vaccinations, social distancing and so on, never gets rid of the fear. It placates it, it alleviates it, but the fear is always there behind it, running it. So, I'm going to read a quote now. And I've made about 9 different headings. And the first heading is, Did God create death? And here's a quote. Death is the central theme from which all illusions stem. Like I say, it's the keystone. Is it not madness to think of life as being born, aging, losing vitality, and dying in the end? Isn't that madness? And we all know this. We've all felt our bodies aging, especially when you get my age. You start feeling more and more aspects of the body beginning to, be more vulnerable. And it is the one fixed, unchangeable belief of the world that all things in it are born only to die. Plants, animals, humans, even the sun will eventually burn out. This is regarded as the way of nature, not to be raised to question, but to be accepted as the natural law of life. And we do, we accept it. This is how it is here. And all this is taken as the will of God, although we may not say that. Somehow we think it's made by some creator. And no one asks if a loving creator could will this. Would a loving creator create something that's always going to die? Huh? If we believe God created this, then death must be seen as the symbol of the fear of God. So if God creates everything that will die, then He's the cause of my death. So I'm afraid of God. His love is blotted out or blocked in this one idea. But it's all hidden. Because we believe in death, we blame God and we block out his love. All very unconscious. The keystone of the ego script. One of the things the Course in Miracles says is always ask the question, what is it for? Purpose is everything. So here's the purpose of death. It has a purpose. We came into the world to escape the pain of guilt of separating from God by blaming everyone else. But we don't realize we have dedicated ourselves to death. So I'll just explain for you, Jens-Jørn, I don't know how much Ingun has trained you in the Course in Miracles, but what the Course in Miracles says is that we had this tiny idea of separating from God. You know, the principles. But we came up with this unholy trinity of sin, guilt, and fear. I deem my separation from God a sin. I therefore feel guilty. And then from that comes fear. Fear that God will rise up and punish me for separating from God. It's all made up, but that's the script that we have. So we come into the world, make up bodies to hide in, to escape this guilt, and then find something out there, a virus, a human, a politician, a country, whatever, something out there to blame for this dying, aging, decaying body. We have chosen death as the ultimate punishment for the sin of separation from God. This is our when someone has been a criminal, the ultimate punishment is execution, is death, we think. Right? So we've made death the ultimate punishment for the sin of separating from God, and we look for someone or something, even God, to blame for it. However, the real punishment is actually not death, but the belief in death. The belief in death is part of the ego's grand plan to keep us from heaven. It is our greatest fear. So it's the belief in death that we're working with in the world, particularly right now. It's up. We all believe that we could be killed by this attacker. Whether it's the deep state or the virus, it doesn't really matter. It's the belief in death that is the problem. We've made it up as the ultimate punishment for the sin of separating from God. Now the big question is, why are we afraid of death? If our souls are eternal, why are we afraid of death? The reality of death is firmly, this is a quote, is firmly rooted in the belief that God's Son is a body. Because we think we are this body with his personality, Douglas's body and his personality, I think is me. So if this goes, if my body and my personality goes, I think I'm going to die. And as we've discovered many times, this sense of self is my most cherished possession. So it's my most cherished possession that I'm afraid of losing. This dream is a dream of death and has nothing to do with the body. We're dreaming that we have a body. And this is a quote from some guy who was writing about this. He said, however, none of this, I think it's Ken, none of this really makes any sense while we identify with the body, but it does begin to as we practice stepping away from it. So in time, as we start stepping away or standing above our battlefield, we start to see that this makes more and more sense. Now the next theme is the fear of death is actually its attraction. We're actually attracted to death, as you'll see. Quote, "No one can die unless he chooses death." And many people communicate this just before they leave. Like in the hospital, they say, I'm going to go now, or whatever. What seems to be the fear is really its attraction. That's part of the quote. Even though we fear death, we seek it everywhere. Look at the movies, the murder movies that we love. The newspapers, we read it. I mean, how many people are reading or listening to the news about this COVID virus day after day after day after day after day? How's it doing? How's the death doing? How's the death doing? How's the death doing? You know, what numbers? And on and on and on. Even though we fear death, we seek it everywhere. Every newspaper, every crime movie proves this, and we love to hear that the sinner has been punished and even executed. You know, in the old days when they had public executions, hundreds of people would come to watch. They love it. We think that death and suicide will be a release and a solution to the ego. Oh, finally I can let go of this painful, decaying, aging sense of self. So we long for it. Unconsciously, we long for death. We have this paradox going, oh, I want to live forever. I want to be eternal. I want to feel healthy. And I really have had enough of this. I want to go. It's going on unconsciously for all of us. The love for death is like the ego's big victory over creation and contains all the ego's secrets. This, again, we're looking at the foundation stone of the ego script, this belief in death. There is a murderer in all of us, and it comes from the belief that we killed God when we chose a separation. This tiny mad idea of separating from God. And then we can't experience God anymore, so we think we killed him. So we think we are a murderer, automatically. And I know in this undoing journey, we have to get in touch with this murderer, this one that really wants to kill, physically or metaphorically, the other, especially our intimate relationship partner. This is the one we usually want to kill first. Now this is what the Course says about death. In truth, there is no death. This is lesson 163, workbook 163. In reality, nothing dies. There is no death. The body does not die because the body itself is neutral and nothing. It was never alive in the first place. Now the ego hates to hear this. The body is not alive. We animate the body with our mind. The body is nothing. Like sin, you know, we made up sin. Sin is a construct. The belief in death is also made up. It's a construct. We made it up. This was the ego's master plan. And it seems to work. Look how we can be controlled by this one fear of death. We can be controlled. The whole world can be controlled because we've made up this one belief, the belief in death. Because we think we are a body. So I'm going to talk a little bit about reincarnation because it applies to death in some way. The small self, that's the body and the personality that has our name. So this body and Douglas, his personality, does not come back. How could this body come back? It can't. And those patterns that I learned from my birth and whatever, they don't come back. But the decision-making part of my mind does. And this is the beauty of the work that we do. That we take it with us. Our mighty companions, which could be interpreted as the lessons that we learned, the loving thoughts that we take with us, we remember what we have learnt this lifetime, i.e. the ability to choose between the ego and the Holy Spirit, those two voices that we listen to. This training that we're doing, this choosing away from the ego and listening to the Holy Spirit, what we have done with that practice we take with us. Of course, it's the mind. We come back with the knowingness that we got this lifetime. And we've heard this, like Jesus, when he came 2,000 years ago, he'd probably been working lifetimes with this. So he came, even as a very young man, he was extremely advanced. And many of us have probably been working with our minds in previous lifetimes. Otherwise we wouldn't be attracted to A Course in Miracles, for example, the most radical teaching on the planet. So in a way we don't need to fear death because the body's nothing anyway. But you'll notice how on this journey we get so attracted back into the ego script. And all of the choices within the ego. Our real job is to get back to the decision-making part of the mind and work with choosing away from the ego. Continuing with the reincarnation theme, between lives, the unconscious guilt of separation from God starts to come back into our awareness, and because of that we re-justify going back into another body to reincarnate and escape or deny that guilt. I've heard this in other books as well. This guilt starts to bubble up in the mind. And it becomes unbearable, so we come back into another body. And I think this next sentence really is the most beautiful of all this. Exiting the earth, or dying, is actually a more pleasant experience than birth. You know, you might, if you're shot or you have something that's making you very painful, maybe that moment is very painful, but the actual death is not painful. Being born is about going unconscious. We forget where we've come from when we're born. In near-death experiences, I've heard that we often experience eternity. Death is like a pause or a reset, a transition. So death itself is actually very gentle, but we fear it more than anything. It's made up, guys. We made it all up. The Course goes on and says, you know, the Course is very radical. It's you're either in love or you're in fear. And the same principle goes with there is either life or death. You can't, there isn't both. Having already said that there is no death. If death is real for anything, there is no life. Death denies life. But if there is reality in life, death is denied. No compromise in this is possible. So again, Jesus is teaching us that it's one or the other. We either believe in life, eternal, or death. And of course it says that death is just an illusion that we've made up. So what can we do as light workers, which we're becoming gradually? And this is also a quote. Teacher of God, your one assignment could be stated thus. Accept no compromise in which death plays a part. And what is the end of death? Nothing but this, the realization that the Son of God is guiltless now and forever. So he's telling us that we are guiltless eternally. In all of this thing going on in the world, no one is talking about, can you heal the fear of death? Can you reduce the fear of death? You can alleviate it, yes, by defending against it, but can you heal it? And Jesus says the fear of death will go as its appeal, its attraction, is yielded to love's real attraction. So when we choose away from the ego and choose the Holy Spirit, this fear of death fades. We don't become afraid of it anymore. As we choose away from the ego and choose spirit, we choose love, the fear of death will fade gradually. The more advanced we become, the less afraid we are, because we know, gradually getting to know that we're not a body. And I'd like to finish with like a little prayer almost, so please close your eyes and breathe if you choose. And this is a section, a quote from the psychotherapy pamphlet. It's called Another Way of Dying. And it means another way of the body dying. Yet there is a kind of seeming death that has a different source. It does not come because of hurtful thoughts and raging anger at the universe. It merely signifies the end has come for usefulness of body functioning. And so it is discarded as a choice, as one lays by a garment now outworn. This is what death should be, a quiet choice, made joyfully and with a sense of peace. Because the body has been kindly used to help the Son of God along the way he goes to God. We thank the body then for all the service it has given us. But we are thankful too, the need is done to walk this world of limits. We call it death, but it is actually liberty. It does not come in forms that seem to be thrust down in pain upon unwilling flesh, but as a gentle welcome to release. If there has been true healing, this can be the form in which death comes when it is time to rest a while, from labor gladly done and gladly ended. And finally, at the top of the ladder, and the last to be overcome will be death. Of course, without the idea of death, there is no world. All dreams will end with this one.